In a world where the souls of the dead are trapped in books, one librarian must protect them from those who seek to unleash their devastating power. But when a dangerous soul escapes, she'll risk everything to stop it from destroying everything she's sworn to protect. In the heart of the world, beyond the reach of mortal eyes, stood the Library of Souls. It was not a mere collection of dusty old books, but a sacred place where the most powerful and dangerous entities in the world were contained. Each book held the soul of a deceased being, bound by ancient magic to ensure they could never escape. The souls were not only a part of the deceased's essence, but also stored their memories, powers, and, in some cases, their malevolent desires. The librarian, Niamh, had cared for the library for centuries. She was an ancient being herself, created to serve as its eternal guardian. Her role was to protect these souls, spirits of kings, warriors, wizards, and even common folk. She kept the books organized, ensuring that none of the souls could escape and wreak havoc upon the world. The library was a place of peace, but one fraught with danger. Each time Niamh gazed upon a book's cover, she could feel the power contained within. It was a reminder of why the library's location had to remain secret and its contents guarded. However, one day, Niamh discovered something that would shatter the tranquility of her existence. A book was missing. Niamh set out on foot, leaving the library behind. As she stepped into the world outside, she felt the familiar tug of the Forsaken King's spirit, pulling her in a specific direction. The magic of the soul was strong, and it called to her like a beacon in the night. She traveled across strange, wild landscapes, forests where the trees whispered of ancient secrets, mountains that seemed to touch the sky, and vast plains where the wind carried the scent of forgotten times. Niamh had seen all of these places before, but now they felt different. They were filled with a tension, an unnatural stillness that suggested the Forsaken King's soul was stirring. Along her journey, she encountered others who had been touched by the king's legacy. A small village where the people spoke of the tyranny of a long-dead ruler, their eyes hollow and haunted by the past. The memories of the king's cruelty lingered, like a shadow that had not faded with time. Then, in the distance, she spotted a ruin, an ancient tower, half collapsed and crumbling under the weight of centuries. The magic that surrounded it was unmistakable. This was where the Forsaken King's soul had been taken. But it was not the Forsaken King alone who awaited her. It was the Book of Forsaken Kings that had disappeared, a tome containing the soul of a tyrant king, whose reign had once ravaged kingdoms and enslaved thousands. His spirit was volatile, dangerous, and far too powerful to roam free. Niamh had locked it away in the deepest vault of the library, far from any who might wish to wield it. But now it was gone. The book was missing, and with it, the soul of the Forsaken King had been freed. Niamh's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the magnitude of the loss. The Forsaken King's soul was more than just a danger. It was a force capable of reshaping the world. The very fabric of reality could unravel if his power was unleashed. And there were always those dark figures lurking in the shadows who would seek to claim such power for themselves. She knew she had to act quickly. There was no time to waste. The longer the Forsaken King's soul remained outside the book, the more powerful it would become. The balance of the world was in jeopardy. Without hesitation, Niamh began her journey to retrieve the book and restore the soul to its prison. Niamh approached the tower cautiously, her senses on high alert. The energy in the air crackled with dark magic. She could feel the presence of others, powerful sorcerers who had unlocked the king's soul and were attempting to harness its power. These sorcerers were no strangers to her. They were a secretive cabal, a group of dark mages who had long sought to control the forces of life and death. They were drawn to the library, to the souls contained within, believing they could unlock the secrets of immortality and power by wielding such spirits. Niamh had heard whispers of their intentions before. She had even destroyed a few of their dangerous attempts to break into the library. But now, they had gone too far. They had already begun their ritual, and the Forsaken King's soul was in their grasp. As Niamh neared the tower, she could see the sorcerers, clad in robes of midnight black, standing in a circle around a book. Their incantations filled the air, weaving a dark tapestry of magic, each word dripping with intent to bind the king's spirit to their wills. The ritual was nearing its peak. Niamh knew she had little time to stop them, but she couldn't simply charge in. The sorcerers were powerful, and the Forsaken King's soul was now part of the ritual. One misstep, and the consequences could be catastrophic. The air inside the tower crackled with the force of the Forsaken King's rage. Niamh's chant reverberated through the walls, her voice a single thread of stability in the face of chaos. She could feel the power of the king's soul, dark and overwhelming, twisting around her like a storm of shadows. His wrath was palpable, his desire for freedom growing stronger with every passing second. The sorcerers, now fully aware of the danger they had unleashed, tried to regroup, their eyes wild with terror. Their chants faltered as they realized the king's soul was far more than they had bargained for. He was no mere spirit. He was a force of nature, capable of shattering the very fabric of reality. Niamh's heart raced, but she didn't falter. The binding spell was her only hope, but it had to be done perfectly, or else the king's soul would consume her and the world around her. Her voice rose higher, the ancient words of the spell flowing through her like fire, a wave of magic that sought to bind the king's essence to the book once again. The Forsaken King's presence intensified, a shadowy figure that seemed to materialize before her eyes. His face twisted in a grimace of fury, his eyes burning with unholy light. He loomed above her, a terrifying, ethereal figure that threatened to swallow the entire tower. "You think you can stop me?" The king's voice boomed, a low growl that rattled Niamh's bones. It wasn't just a voice. It was a power that spoke directly to her soul, an ancient force that had once ruled an empire with fear and iron. "I will break your bonds. I will destroy everything. The world will bend to my will again." Niamh felt his words like a weight pressing down on her chest. His power was immense, and for a moment, she feared she might fail. The magic she was wielding was fragile, a delicate thread in the storm that was the Forsaken King's fury. But she had no choice. The world depended on her. She focused all her energy into the spell, willing herself to become the anchor that would stop the king's rage from consuming the world. The runes around the book began to glow with a soft, golden light, the magic of the binding spell taking shape. The sorcerers, in their panic, tried to interfere, but their attempts to cast spells were swallowed by the force of the king's soul. One by one, they fell, their bodies crumbling to the ground as they were consumed by the backlash of the king's power. The last sorcerer attempted to flee, but the king's wrath was too great. With a single swipe of ethereal force, the man was torn apart, his body vanishing into nothingness. The tower trembled, its ancient structure groaning under the pressure of the magical forces clashing within it. The king's voice echoed, desperate and furious. "You cannot keep me here forever. I will rise again. There is nothing that can hold me." But Niamh was resolute. Her will was stronger. She had spent centuries guarding the souls within the library, and she knew what was at stake. With one final focused chant, she released the full power of the spell, her body glowing with blinding light. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, with a violent explosion of light and sound, the Forsaken King's soul was sucked back into the book. The power that had threatened to tear the tower apart was suddenly contained, its furious energy swirling into the book's pages. Niamh collapsed to her knees, the exertion of the spell leaving her drained, but the magic held. The king's soul was bound again, sealed within the confines of the book. The light around the book flickered once, then dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the runes etched into the cover. The tower, though damaged, had not collapsed entirely. The air was still, and the oppressive weight of the king's presence had faded, leaving behind a sense of uneasy calm. Niamh rose to her feet, her body aching from the strain of the spell. The book was back in her hands, its dangerous contents now secured. The Forsaken King's soul was once again a prisoner, his wrathful spirit subdued. But Niamh knew this was only a temporary victory. Chapter 8. The Price of Power. As Niamh made her way out of the ruined tower, her thoughts were heavy. The Forsaken King's soul had been contained, but at what cost? She had expended much of her magic in the binding, and she could feel the weariness creeping into her bones. Her powers were not infinite, and each time she used them to contain a soul like the king's, the toll grew heavier. She gazed down at the book in her hands, the once pristine cover now scorched by the magic that had been used to imprison its contents. The souls contained within the library were her responsibility, but their power was dangerous, and each time one escaped, even briefly, it brought the world one step closer to chaos. The journey had taken its toll on her in more ways than one. She had faced the king's fury, outwitted the sorcerers who had sought to control him, and now, once again, the library's fragile peace had been restored. But Niamh couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play, something darker than the Forsaken King's soul. As she returned to the library, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the battle was not over, she felt a new presence stirring among the books. There was a whisper in the air, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. The souls in the library were stirring, their whispers no longer gentle. Niamh could feel the unrest in the air. Something had changed. The balance she had fought so hard to maintain was shifting. The library was safe, for now. But deep within its walls, an ancient magic was awakening. Niamh entered the Library of Souls, the heavy doors groaning as they opened. The vast expanse of bookshelves stretched out before her, each book holding a soul. Each soul a secret, a story, a life. The library felt different now, the air charged with an unseen tension. She took a deep breath, her senses tingling. Something was wrong. The whispers of the souls, once mere background murmurs, had intensified. There was a restlessness in the air. She could feel the shift in the magic that flowed through the library. Something was awakening. She glanced down at the Book of Forsaken Kings in her hands. The soul of the tyrant king was bound within it, but the magic that had sealed him felt fragile. Had the ritual truly worked? Was it enough to hold his spirit for good? Niamh's thoughts were interrupted by a low, resonating hum that vibrated through the library's stone floor. She turned, her eyes narrowing. It was coming from deep within the heart of the library, from the very vaults where the most dangerous souls were kept. The bookcases that lined the walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the strange energy. The vaults were not meant to be disturbed. Only the most powerful and dangerous souls were kept there, souls that even Niamh feared. Without hesitation, she made her way toward the source of the disturbance. The path seemed longer than she remembered, the walls narrowing as though the library itself was closing in on her. The deeper she ventured, the more intense the hum became. The souls were stirring, their energy vibrating with a sense of urgency. There was no mistaking it now. The balance had been disrupted. When she finally reached the vault, she found the door ajar. The wards that usually protected it shattered. Something, or someone, had broken through. Inside, the once dormant books pulsed with a dark, malevolent energy. Niamh could feel the power of the souls within, their essence calling to her, each one a dangerous force that could alter the very fabric of the world. And at the center of the vault, surrounded by swirling shadows, was the Book of Forsaken Kings, now open. The pages turned on their own, as though the king's spirit was alive within it, seeking to escape once more. "No," Niamh whispered, horror creeping into her voice. The king's soul was no longer merely bound. It was calling to the others. The magic had broken, and the other souls had begun to awaken, their powers stirring as the Forsaken King sought to command them. The vault trembled, and the shelves of books began to rattle. A fierce wind whipped through the chamber, blowing Niamh's hair and robes. She reached for the book, her fingers grazing the edge, but before she could grasp it, the shadows flared. A figure appeared before her, a wraith-like presence, its form shifting between man and shadow. It was the Forsaken King, his spirit fully manifested, no longer contained by the book. His eyes, burning with ancient wrath, locked onto hers. "You cannot stop me," he growled, his voice now a low, guttural rumble. "You've failed, Librarian. The souls are free, and they will follow me." Niamh felt a surge of panic, but she pushed it down. She couldn't let the king's spirit win. Not now. She had failed once before to keep him contained, but this time, she would not let the balance of the world crumble. With all the strength she could muster, she reached deep within herself, tapping into the last reserves of her magic. Her hands began to glow with blinding light, the ancient runes etched into her skin pulsing with the power of the library. "I will stop you," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "This library is a sanctuary for the souls. You will never escape." The king's laugh echoed through the vault, dark and mocking. "You are only one, and I am an army. The souls belong to me now." The air around them crackled with energy as the other books began to tremble, their souls reaching out in response to the king's call. Niamh's power surged, but she could feel it waning. The king was stronger than ever, and the souls he commanded were far more than she had anticipated. The library shook as if it were alive, the weight of countless souls pressing down on her. With each heartbeat, the king's power grew, and Niamh's resolve faltered. Then, as if in answer to her desperation, a wave of light erupted from the center of the vault, rays of pure magic that pierced through the shadows. Niamh felt the magic surge through her like a lifeline, a force far older and more powerful than anything she had ever known. It was the souls, not the kings, but the others, the ones that had been bound in the library for centuries. They had felt her struggle, and now they were aiding her, lending her their strength in their final act of redemption. The light grew brighter, blinding. Niamh lifted her hands, and the light intensified, wrapping around the Forsaken King's spirit, forcing him back into the book. His scream filled the vault, echoing through the entire library as he was dragged back into the pages, his form dissipating like smoke in the wind. The book slammed shut with a deafening thud. The vault was still. Niamh collapsed to her knees, exhausted. The souls that had aided her in the final moment were once again at peace, their power sealed within the library's walls. The Book of Forsaken Kings lay before her, its pages now silent and still. The library, though damaged, had been saved. The balance had been restored, at least for now. But Niamh knew the truth. The library would always be at risk. Souls, once freed, could never be truly contained forever. The temptation for power was too great. And while the king's spirit had been bound once again, there were always those who would try to unlock its power. Niamh rose slowly, wiping the sweat from her brow. She had done what she could, but she understood that her role as the Librarian of Souls would never be finished. The library would always need its keeper, and she would always be its guardian. For as long as she lived, she would stand between the souls and the world, ensuring that no force could ever again release them into the wild. And so, with a final glance at the sealed book, Niamh returned to her post, knowing that her watch would continue, as it always had. The library's doors closed behind her, and the souls whispered once more, "The end."